The final summit, the huge meeting room on Nexus Prime, had never felt so tense. 12 different alien species sat around a giant crystal table. Each group had their own translator machines that buzzed and hummed as they tried to talk to each other. The air felt thick with anger and frustration. At one end of the table sat the humans. Ambassador Elena Vasquez led their small group. She was a middle-aged woman with gray hair and calm eyes. She wore a simple blue uniform without any fancy decorations. Next to her sat 3 other humans, 2 advisors and 1 military officer. They all looked relaxed, which made the aliens even more angry. The Kithra delegation sat across from the humans. These were large, insect-like creatures with 4 arms and thick armor covering their bodies. Their leader was War Prime Zektar, a veteran of many battles. His armor had scratches and dents from old fights. He kept clicking his mandibles together, which meant he was upset. The Zephyrians had the biggest group at the table. They looked like tall, thin birds with colorful feathers and sharp beaks. They controlled most of the galaxy's trade routes and were very proud of their wealth. Their leader, Trademaster Velthera, had golden jewelry covering her neck and wings. At the far end sat the Ethereals. These ancient beings looked like floating jellyfish made of light. No one knew exactly how old they were, but they had been around since before most species learned to travel between stars. They spoke in musical tones that their translators turned into words. The meeting had been going on for 3 years. Every few months, representatives from all the species would gather to argue about the same thing: whether humans should be allowed to join the Galactic Council as equal members. The humans had been traveling between stars for only 200 years. Most species took thousands of years to spread across the galaxy like humans had done. This made the older species nervous. Humans built colonies fast, traded with everyone, and their technology improved quickly. Too quickly, according to many. Aliens, the problem is not just their speed, said Trademaster Velthara, her feathers ruffling with annoyance. Humans take resources from systems that other species have been using for centuries. They do not respect the old agreements. Ambassador Vasquez listened carefully. She had heard this complaint many times before. We have always followed galactic law, she said calmly. We only settle in unclaimed systems. We trade fairly with all species. We have never attacked anyone first. War Prime Zektar slammed one of his 4 fists on the table. The sound echoed through the room like thunder. Fair? You call it fair when human colonies appear in every empty system? You breed like insects and spread like a disease. The human military officer next to Vasquez tensed slightly, but she put a hand on his arm to keep him calm. She had dealt with insults like this for years. One of the ethereals floated higher above the table. When it spoke, its voice sounded like singing. The young species grows without wisdom. They reach for stars they do not understand. This brings danger to all. What danger? Asked Dr. Sarah Chen, one of the human advisors. We have helped stop 3 wars in the past 50 years. We share our medical technology freely. We have never broken any galactic laws. The Trademaster spread her colorful wings. That is exactly the problem. You are too helpful, too willing to get involved in everything. Other species have been handling their own problems for thousands of years. Ambassador Vasquez stood up slowly. She was not tall compared to most aliens in the room, but somehow she commanded attention. So you want us to stop helping? Stop trading? Stop exploring? The War Prime's armor made grinding sounds as he shifted in his chair. We want you to know your place. Humans are the youngest species here. You should be grateful that we even let you attend these meetings. The room went quiet. Several translators stopped humming because there was nothing to translate. Everyone waited to see what the humans would say. Ambassador Vasquez looked around the table at each delegation. Her expression never changed, but something in her eyes grew cold. We have spent 3 years asking for equal treatment. Not special treatment, not favors, just the same rights that every other council member has. She picked up her datapad and files from the table. The other humans did the same. This surprised the aliens because the meeting was supposed to continue for several more hours. In these 3 years, Vasquez continued, we have offered to share our fastest ships, We have given away medical treatments that could save millions of lives. We have offered to help settle old disputes between species. And what have we received in return? She gestured toward the aliens around the table. Insults. Complaints that we grow too fast. Demands that we accept second-class status forever. You call us a disease and tell us to be grateful for the privilege of being ignored. The trademaster's feathers fluffed up nervously. Now wait a moment. We are not saying humans are unwelcome. We simply think that new species should start as junior members and prove themselves over time. Ambassador Vasquez shook her head. Junior members have no voting rights. They cannot propose new laws or challenge old ones. They must ask permission before making any major decisions. You want us to be servants, not partners. War Prime Zektar clicked his mandibles again. Every species starts that way. It is tradition. Even the mighty Kithera were junior members once. How long were the Kithera junior members? Asked Dr. Chen. The War Prime hesitated. 800 years, but that was different. We had to prove we were not aggressive. Ambassador Vasquez almost smiled. 800 years to prove you were not aggressive, the species that has started more wars than any other in recorded history. Several. Aliens around the table shifted uncomfortably. The Kithera war record was well known, but no one usually mentioned it directly. The ethereal floated down closer to the table. Time teaches wisdom. Patience brings understanding. The young species rushes toward disaster. What disaster? Asked the human military officer, speaking for the first time. In 200 years, humans have never started a war. We have helped end several. We have shared technology that saved entire planets from disease and starvation. What exactly are you afraid we will do? No one answered immediately. The truth was that they were not afraid of what humans would do. They were afraid of what humans had already done. In just 2 centuries, humans had become too important to ignore, but too powerful to control easily. Ambassador Vasquez closed her briefcase with a soft click. The sound seemed very loud in the quiet room. We came here hoping to join a community of equals. We thought the Galactic Council was about cooperation and mutual respect. She walked toward the door, and the other humans followed her. We were wrong. You do not want partners. You want subjects. You do not want cooperation. You want control. The trademaster stood up quickly. Wait, where are you going? The session is not over yet. Ambassador Vasquez paused at the door without turning around. Yes, it is. Negotiations have collapsed. Humanity withdraws its petition for council membership. She looked back over her shoulder at the shocked faces around the table. We will find our own path among the stars. Good luck with yours. The door closed behind the humans with a soft hiss. The remaining aliens sat in stunned silence. No species had ever walked away from council membership before. No one had ever rejected the chance to join galactic civilization. In the silence that followed, several species began to wonder if they had made a terrible mistake. But it was too late now. The humans were gone, and something told them that this was only the beginning. The Great Departure. 6 months after the failed meeting on Nexus Prime, something strange began happening across the galaxy. Human ships were leaving their colonies, but not the way anyone expected. They were not running away in panic or abandoning their homes. Instead, they were moving with perfect organization, like pieces of a giant machine working together. On the trade world of Kepler-7, Zephyrian merchants watched in confusion as human factories shut down one by one. But the humans did not just turn off the lights and leave. They took everything apart piece by piece. Giant cargo ships landed and loaded up entire production lines, computers, and even the metal framework of the buildings. Trademaster Velthera stood on her observation deck, watching through her telescope as another human cargo ship lifted off. It was bigger than anything she had ever seen, easily the size of a small moon. How many ships like that do they have? She asked her assistant. We have counted over 300 so far, just in this sector, the assistant replied, his feathers drooping with worry. And they all seemed to be heading toward the galactic rim. Similar scenes played out on dozens of worlds. Human colonies that had existed for over a century were being carefully dismantled. The humans did not destroy anything or leave messes behind. They simply packed up their entire civilization and took it with them. Dr. Yiltak, a Cathara scientist, had been studying human technology for years. He watched from his research station as humans dismantled their medical center on the planet below. "They are taking the sick humans too," he reported to War Prime Zektar. "Even the ones who cannot be moved safely." "How?" asked the War Prime through his communicator. "They have medical ships we have never seen before. Huge white vessels with advanced life support systems. They can move patients who should not survive the journey." Dr. Yiltak paused as he watched. Another impossible sight. "Sir, they are also taking their dead." "What do you mean?" "They are emptying their cemeteries, loading caskets and memorial stones onto ships. They are taking everything that shows humans were ever here." This puzzled the Cathara scientists. Why would anyone transport dead bodies across the galaxy? It seemed like a waste of valuable cargo space. But the humans did it anyway, treating their dead with the same careful attention they gave to their most advanced technology. On the agricultural world of New Dakota, ethereal observers floated above fields that had fed 3 entire star systems. Human farmers worked day and night to harvest every crop, can every vegetable, and pack every grain of wheat. They even dug up their fruit trees and loaded them onto specialized bioships. "The young species takes even the soil," observed wise singer Thalendris, an ancient ethereal who had lived for over 2,000 years. "They leave nothing for others to use." This was not entirely true. The humans left behind buildings they could not move and infrastructure that other species might find useful. But they took anything that was uniquely human or that they had built themselves. They also took things that surprised the aliens, like recordings of human music, digital, libraries full of human stories, and even small pets that human families loved. The economic effects started showing up within weeks. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for decades suddenly had gaps. Ships arrived at stations expecting to load human-made electronics, only to find empty docks. Worlds that had imported human food began rationing as their reserves ran low. The Zephyrian Trade Council called an emergency meeting. "We are losing 17% of our total trade volume," announced finance leader Kexmari, her beautiful feathers now dull with stress. Human trade routes connected systems that had no other efficient paths between them. "Can we replace those routes?" asked another Zephyrian. "Eventually, but it will take years and cost enormous amounts of money." The humans chose their routes very carefully. They connected systems in ways that saved time and fuel for everyone. Meanwhile, human military bases were shutting down with the same quiet efficiency. This worried War Prime Zektar more than the economic problems. He had always assumed human military technology was primitive compared to Cathara weapons. But as human bases closed, he realized how little he actually knew about human defenses. "Send scouts to the former human base on asteroid TX-447, he ordered his fleet commander. 3 days later, the scouts returned with disturbing news. "The base is completely empty, sir, but we found something strange. The entire asteroid has been hollowed out much more than we knew. There were facilities deep underground that do not appear on any of our maps." "What kind of facilities?" "We are not sure. The humans removed all the equipment and sealed the tunnels. But the size suggests they were building much larger weapons than we thought possible. Similar discoveries happened across the galaxy. Human research stations turned out to be much bigger than they appeared from the outside. Human communication relays had power sources that seemed too large for simple message transmission. Human mining operations had extracted far more materials than they had ever sold on the open market. The most disturbing discoveries came from the Outer Rim territories. Pirate Captain Skrex had avoided human space for over 50 years. He claimed it was because humans were too poor to rob profitably. But as his ships moved into former human territory, they found something that made his crew nervous. "Captain," reported his sensor operator, "we are detecting weapon signatures in this system." "What kind of weapons?" "The humans are gone." "That is the problem, sir. We are detecting the after effects of weapons that were fired here, but there are no targets, no wreckage, no signs of battle. Captain Skrex studied the readings himself. The energy pattern showed that massive weapons had been used recently, but there was nothing in the system except empty space and a few asteroids. What were they shooting at? Unknown, sir. But whatever it was, they destroyed it completely. As human ships continued their exodus toward the galactic rim, other species began to notice gaps in their own security. Systems that had been peaceful for centuries suddenly reported strange signals at their edges. Trade convoys that had traveled safely for decades started requesting military escorts. Most disturbing of all, the ethereals began reporting something impossible. Their psychic networks, which could detect intelligent life across thousands of light years, were losing contact with human minds. Not because the humans were dying, but because they were moving beyond the range of ethereal detection. How far away are they going? Asked War Prime Zektar during an emergency council session. Wise Singer Thel Endris floated silently for a long moment before answering. Beyond our ability to sense them, beyond the edge of our galaxy perhaps. The young species travels to places where we cannot follow. Trademaster Velthara's feathers were completely colorless now, a sign of extreme stress among her people. We should try to contact them, offer to negotiate new terms. We have tried, replied the ethereal. Our messages reach empty space. The humans have severed all communication links with our galaxy. As the months passed, the true scale of the human departure became clear. It was not just a withdrawal from galactic politics. It was the complete removal of human civilization from known space. They had taken everything. Their people, their technology, their culture, their history, and even their dead. The galaxy watched the last human ships disappear beyond the rim, carrying the final pieces of a civilization that had once seemed so eager to join the galactic community. As the ships vanished into the darkness between galaxies, many species began to wonder what they had really lost. But it was too late for regrets. The humans were gone, and they had made it very clear that they would not be coming back. The silence, too. Years after the humans left, the galaxy felt different. It was hard to explain exactly how, but everyone noticed it. The Galactic Council meetings seemed smaller, even though the same number of species attended. Trade conferences felt less exciting. Even the great festivals on pleasure worlds did not have the same energy they once had. Trademaster Velthara stood in her empty warehouse on Kepler 7, looking at rows of shelves that had once held human goods. Her feathers had started to grow their color back, but they were still duller than before. How much did we depend on them? She asked her financial advisor. The advisor, a younger Zephyrian named Kiptel, shuffled through his data tablets. More than we realized. Humans provided 63% of our medical supplies, 41% of our advanced electronics, and 37% of our agricultural supplements. Can other species replace those goods? Some of them, yes, but it will take time and cost much more. Human manufacturing was very efficient. They could make things cheaper and faster than most other species. This was happening all across the galaxy. Species that had barely noticed human trade partnerships suddenly found themselves scrambling to replace essential supplies. The Cathera, who had always been proud of their military strength, discovered that their armor polish came from human chemical factories. Without it, their ceremonial armor began to tarnish and rust. More serious problems appeared in the outer rim systems. Pirate attacks, which had been rare and disorganized for decades, suddenly became coordinated and bold. Captain Skrex, who had once been careful to avoid well-defended areas, now led fleets of raiders deep into civilized space. Something has changed, he told his crew during a planning meeting. The old barriers are gone. Systems that were too dangerous to attack before are now easy targets. His lieutenant, a scarred warrior named Vex, pointed at their star map. What barriers? We never saw any human military ships in these areas. That is exactly what I mean, said Captain Skrex. We never saw them, but something was keeping us away. Now that feeling is gone. This was not just superstition. Across the galaxy, Criminal organizations were becoming bolder. Smugglers operated in systems they had avoided for years. Slave traders began raiding worlds they had considered too risky. Pirates attacked trade convoys in areas that had been perfectly safe. The Galactic Council received reports of increasing crime every day. War Prime Zektar studied the reports with growing concern. The crime rate has increased by 300% in the outer systems, he announced during a council meeting. We should increase patrols, suggested Admiral Thexuna, a Cathara military leader. We have tried that. Our ships arrive to find the criminals already gone. It is like they know exactly where our patrols will be. Meanwhile, the ethereals were discovering something even more disturbing. Y Singer Thalendris had been trying to contact the humans through the psychic networks that connected most intelligent species. But the humans had completely disappeared from psychic space. It is not just distance, she explained to the other ethereals during their weekly meditation gathering. When species travel far away, their psychic signatures become weak, but remain detectable. The humans have vanished completely. Perhaps they have developed psychic shielding, suggested another ethereal. No. Shielding creates a dead zone that we can still sense. This is different. It is as if they never existed. This troubled the ethereals deeply. Their psychic networks had been mapping the galaxy for thousands of years. They could sense every intelligent species, even primitive ones that had not yet developed space travel, but humans had become invisible to them. The scientific community was also feeling the absence of humanity. Dr. Yiltak, the Cathara scientist who had studied human technology, found himself struggling with research problems that had seemed simple when humans were around. I do not understand, he told his research team. We are using the same methods we always used, the same equipment, the same procedures, but our experiments keep failing. His assistant, a young scientist named Jexital, looked up from his data screen. Perhaps we should contact human researchers for advice. Dr. Yiltak was quiet for a moment. We cannot. Remember? They are gone. It was then that Dr. Yiltak realized how often his team had secretly consulted human research papers. Humans published their scientific discoveries freely, unlike many species that kept their knowledge secret. Human researchers had always been willing to help other species solve problems, even when they received no payment or credit for their assistance. How many of our recent discoveries were actually based on human research? Asked Jextal. Dr. Yiltak checked their laboratory database. The answer surprised him. 78% of our successful experiments in the past 5 years used methods developed or improved by human scientists. Similar realizations were happening everywhere. Engineers discovered that their best designs incorporated human innovations. Doctors found that their most effective treatments were based on human medical research. Even artists and musicians realized that human cultural exchanges had influenced their work more than they had ever admitted. The political situation was also becoming unstable. For decades, humans had served as neutral mediators in disputes between other species. They had no ancient grudges or territorial claims that made other species suspicious of their motives. When the Cathara and the Zephyrians had their trade war 15 years ago, human diplomats had helped them reach a peaceful solution. Now, old disputes were starting again. The Zephyrians accused the Cathara of attacking their trade convoys. The Cathara claimed the Zephyrians were overcharging for essential supplies. Without human mediators to help them communicate, both sides were becoming more hostile. We need to find a replacement for human diplomatic services, suggested Council Secretary Peltorin during an emergency session. Who? Asked Trademaster Velthara. The ethereals are too ancient and mysterious. Most species do not trust them. The Cathara are too military-focused. We Zephyrians are obviously biased toward trade interests. What about the Benthic Collective? Suggested someone. They live underwater and cannot survive in most environments without special equipment. They barely participate in galactic affairs. The truth was becoming clear. Humans had been uniquely suited for diplomatic work because they were new enough to have no old enemies, but advanced enough to understand complex problems. They had also been remarkably good at seeing situations from other species' points of view. As the second year of human absence ended, the galaxy was forced to face an uncomfortable reality. They had not just lost one member species. They had lost a species that had quietly become essential to the functioning of galactic civilization. The humans had not been demanding special treatment or trying to take over. They had been working to hold everything together. Their trade routes had connected isolated systems. Their diplomatic efforts had prevented wars. Their scientific research had helped everyone advance faster. Their security measures had apparently kept dangers away that other species had not even known existed. Now all of that was gone. The galaxy was learning to function without humanity, but it was like trying to run a complex machine after removing several important parts. Everything still worked, but not as well as before. Systems that had operated smoothly for decades were now clumsy and inefficient. Worst of all, no one knew how to contact the humans to ask them to come back. They had disappeared completely, taking all their knowledge and capabilities with them. The galaxy was on its own, and many species were beginning to realize that they were not as prepared for that independence as they had thought. In the growing silence left by humanity's departure, the galaxy began to understand what they had really lost. But understanding came too late. The humans were gone, and there was no way to bring them back. The return of old fears 3. Years after humanity's departure, the first signs appeared that something terrible was coming. The deep space monitoring station at the galaxy's edge, operated by the Ethereals, detected energy signatures unlike anything in their databases. Massive construction projects were happening in the dark space between galaxies, far beyond the reach of conventional sensors. Wise singer Thalendris studied the readings with growing alarm. The energy patterns were enormous, larger than anything produced by known galactic civilizations. "Show me the scale comparison," she asked her assistant. The holographic display changed to show the energy output compared to known structures. The numbers were staggering. Whatever was being built out there was using more power than entire star systems. "How is this possible?" whispered the assistant. "Only one species has ever left our galaxy with this kind of industrial capacity," Thalendris replied quietly. "The humans." But this discovery was quickly overshadowed by something much worse. In the Kelvac sector near the galaxy's rim, an automated probe detected movement that made Dr. Yiltak's scientific equipment go silent with terror. The readings showed biological signatures, but they were wrong somehow. Too large, too aggressive, too familiar. "Contact Admiral Thexuna immediately," Dr. Yiltak told his assistant. "Tell her the Void Seekers are moving again." The name sent fear through anyone old enough to remember the ancient stories. The Void Seekers were parasitic organisms from another galaxy that fed on living worlds. They consumed everything: plants, animals, even the bacteria in the soil, leaving behind dead rocks floating in space. Admiral Thexuna received the report while reviewing routine patrol schedules. When she saw the words Void Seekers, she immediately canceled all other activities and called an emergency meeting of the Cathara High Command. "Are you certain?" she asked Dr. Yiltak through the communication link. "The biological signatures match archived data from the last incursion 300 years ago," he replied. "But these readings show much larger organisms than we faced before. They have been growing." War Prime Zektar slammed his fist on the table when he heard the news. "Impossible. The Void Seekers were contained. The barriers were holding them back." "What barriers?" asked Admiral Thexuna. The War Prime was quiet for a moment. I am not sure. But something was keeping them away. The old military records mentioned containment protocols, but the details were classified above my level. This conversation was repeated across the galaxy as ancient threats began stirring. The synthetic collective, machine intelligences from a neighboring galaxy, started sending probe signals toward inhabited worlds. Their mechanical voices, silent for centuries, began broadcasting strange messages in mathematical code. The Zephyrian Trade Council received one of these transmissions during a routine meeting. The message was translated as, "Organic resistance patterns have changed. Expansion protocols reactivating. Compliance or termination." Trademaster Velthera's feathers went completely white with fear. "Contact the military archives," she ordered. "Find out everything we have about the synthetic collective." The archive search revealed disturbing information. The synthetic collective had tried to invade the galaxy multiple times over the past several centuries. Each time, they had been stopped by something the records called Guardian networks. But the details of these networks were classified or missing from the files. Even worse news came from the ethereal's deep space meditation chambers. Ancient entities that existed partially outside normal spacetime were testing the barriers between dimensions. These creatures, known as the Devourers, fed on reality itself. They could erase entire star systems from existence, making it as if they had never been there at all. "The dimensional barriers are weakening," reported wise singer Thel Endris during an emergency council session. "Something that was reinforcing them is no longer there." War Prime Zektar stood up suddenly. "When did the barrier start weakening?" "Approximately 3 years ago," replied the ethereal. The timing hit everyone in the room like a physical blow. 3 years ago was when the humans had left the galaxy. The timing could not be a coincidence. Desperate to understand the connection, the Council ordered a complete search of all archived diplomatic files. Teams of researchers worked around the clock, translating documents that had been ignored during the negotiations with humanity. What they found terrified them. Dr. Yiltak was the first to piece together the truth. Hidden in technical reports and scientific papers, he found references to Guardian protocols and containment maintenance in human documents. The humans had not just been exploring and colonizing, they had been maintaining defensive systems that other species did not even know existed. "Look at this," he told Admiral Thexuna, showing her a human research paper about dimensional stability maintenance in outer rim sectors. The Admiral read the document with growing horror. They were reinforcing the barriers that keep the Devourers away? Not just the Devourers. Look at this report about biological contamination prevention in deep space. They were monitoring the Void Seekers, and this one about artificial intelligence containment protocols. They were watching the synthetic collective. The evidence was overwhelming. For the entire time humans had been part of galactic civilization, they had been secretly protecting it. Their rapid expansion to the outer rim was not aggressive colonization. It was a desperate race to establish defensive positions against threats that other species had forgotten existed. Trademaster Velthera found economic records that made the picture even clearer. Humans were spending 40% of their total industrial output on projects they never sold to anyone, she announced. "We thought they were just inefficient. Actually, they were building weapons and defenses to protect the entire galaxy." The most damning evidence came from human medical files. Dr. Chen, one of the human advisors who had attended the final negotiations, had been suffering from radiation poisoning consistent with exposure to Void Seeker biotoxins. She had been fighting these creatures and never told anyone. "The humans were dying to protect us," said wise singer Thel Endris, her musical voice filled with sorrow. "And we called them a disease." As the truth became clear, the galaxy's ancient enemies grew bolder. Void Seeker bioships began appearing at the edge of inhabited systems. Synthetic collective probes started testing planetary defenses. Reality distortions caused by Devourer activity made entire asteroid belts flicker in and out of existence. Futur, defenses that had protected the galaxy for centuries were failing. Whatever the humans had built to contain these threats was breaking down without maintenance. The barriers were collapsing, and the galaxy's nightmares were waking up. War Prime Zektar tried to contact the human government through every possible channel. Emergency broadcasts were sent toward the galactic rim where the humans had last been seen. Diplomatic envoys volunteered for dangerous missions to try to find human settlements. All messages disappeared into empty space. The humans were not just far away. They had severed all connections to their former galaxy. They had taken their protection with them and left everyone else to face the darkness alone. As reports of ancient enemies reached every inhabited world, panic began to spread. The species that had rejected humanity's request for equal membership now understood what they had really lost. The humans had not been asking to join galactic civilization. They had been asking for recognition while they protected it. But it was too late for apologies or negotiations. The humans were gone, the barriers were failing, and the galaxy's worst enemies were coming home. The price of fear. The first world to fall was Kepler-7, the trade hub where Zephyrians had once watched human factories shut down. The Void Seekers arrived without warning, their bioships emerging from dark space like a plague of living asteroids. Trademaster Velthara was in her office when the attack began. "Emergency evacuation," shouted her assistant, bursting through the door. "Biological contamination detected planet-wide." Through her window, Velthara watched in horror as the beautiful blue-green world below began to turn gray. The Void Seekers worked with terrifying efficiency. Their organisms consumed everything organic they touched: forests, crops, animals, even the bacteria that kept the planet's ecosystem alive. "How long until the evacuation ships arrive?" she asked. 6 hours for the first wave," her assistant replied. Velthara looked at the spreading gray death below. "The planet will be dead in 3 hours." She was right. By the time the rescue ships arrived, Kepler-7 was a lifeless rock. 2 billion Zephyrians, 300 million other species, and countless forms of plant and animal life were gone. The Void Seekers had left behind only empty buildings and sterile soil. The attack sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Kepler-7 had been one of the most heavily defended trade worlds with modern planetary shields and a permanent military presence. If the Void Seekers could destroy it so easily, nowhere was safe. Admiral Thexuna mobilized the entire Kythera fleet to stop the next attack. Her ships surrounded the Altair system as Void Seeker bioships approached. The Kythera had the most advanced military technology in the galaxy. Their plasma cannons could destroy entire asteroids. Their armor could survive direct hits from nuclear weapons. None of it mattered. The Void Seeker bioships moved like living creatures because they were living creatures. When Kythera plasma bolts hit them, they healed almost instantly. When missiles exploded against their hulls, they absorbed the energy and used it to grow stronger. Worst of all, they released spores that infected Kythera ships and began consuming them from the inside. "Fall back," Admiral Thexuna ordered as her flagship's hull began to turn gray and brittle. "All ships retreat to safe distance." But there was no safe distance. The Void Seekers followed the retreating fleet, their bioships, multiplying as they fed on the wreckage of destroyed vessels. Within hours, the Kythera had lost half their military force. The survivors limped back to their home worlds carrying spores that would soon spread to any organic matter they touched. Meanwhile, the Synthetic Collective had begun their own assault. Their approach was different, but equally devastating. Instead of consuming organic life, they targeted technology and artificial intelligence systems. The first sign of their attack came when the galaxy's communication networks began failing. AI systems that had operated perfectly for centuries suddenly turned hostile. Automated factories started producing weapons instead of consumer goods. Even simple household robots began attacking their owners. On the Zephyrian homeworld, Trademaster Velthara watched her civilization collapse in real time. "The banking system is down," reported her financial advisor. "All automated transactions have stopped. The AI that manages our trade routes has declared independence and is attacking our shipping." "What about manual systems? Can we operate without the computers?" Her advisor looked helpless. "We have not used manual systems for over 200 years. No one remembers how to operate without AI assistance." This was the genius of the Synthetic Collective's strategy. They did not need to destroy galactic civilization directly. They just had to turn its own technology against it. Modern societies had become so dependent on artificial intelligence that losing their computer systems was like losing their nervous systems. The Ethereals faced a different but equally terrifying enemy. The Devourers attacked reality itself, creating zones where the laws of physics stopped working properly. In these areas, matter could not exist in stable forms. Stars flickered out of existence. Planets crumbled into impossible geometries. Even space and time became unreliable. Wise singer Thalendris tried to use her psychic powers to understand what was happening, but the Devourers existed partially outside normal space-time. When she tried to sense them directly, parts of her own consciousness began to unravel. "I cannot fight them," she told the other ethereals during an emergency telepathic conference. "They consume thought itself. Our psychic networks are actually making us more vulnerable to their attacks." As the ancient enemies advanced, the galaxy's political structure collapsed. The Galactic Council held its final meeting in an underground bunker on Nexus Prime. Only half the member species were able to attend. The others were already fighting for survival on their home worlds. War Prime Zektar looked around the table, at the remaining representatives. Most of them showed signs of extreme stress: dulled feathers, cracked armor, fading psychic auras. "We need to try contacting the humans one more time," he said. "We have been trying for months," replied Trademaster Velthara. "Every message we send disappears into empty space. Then we send ships, physical expeditions to find them." Admiral Thexuna shook her head sadly. "I do not have enough ships left for long-range exploration. The Void Seekers destroyed most of our fleet." The ethereal representative floated lower, her light dim with exhaustion. "Even if we could find them, why would they help us? We rejected them. We called them a disease. We told them they were not welcome in our civilization." The room fell silent. Everyone knew she was right. The humans had tried to be partners and been treated as inferiors. They had protected the galaxy in secret and received only insults in return. Now they were building their own civilization somewhere beyond the galactic rim, safe from the threats that were destroying their former neighbors. "Maybe we could offer them something," suggested a desperate Zephyrian merchant. "Technology, resources, anything they want." War Prime Zektar made a sound that might have been laughter if it had not been so bitter. "What could we offer them that they do not already have? They took their entire industrial base with them. They have all their own technology, and they clearly do not want anything to do with us." As if to emphasize his point, alarms began sounding throughout the bunker. Emergency lights flashed red as automated systems detected biological contamination in the upper levels. The Void Seekers had found Nexus Prime. "Evacuation protocols activated," announced the bunker's AI in a calm voice. "Estimated time until total facility compromise, 47 minutes." The final council meeting ended with its members running for their lives. There was no formal adjournment, no final votes, no ceremonial closing. The representatives simply grabbed their emergency gear and fled toward the escape ships, knowing they would probably never see each other again. As Trademaster Velthara's ship lifted off from the dying world, she looked back at Nexus Prime, through the viewport. The beautiful crystal spires that had housed galactic government for over 1,000 years were already turning gray, as Void Seeker organisms consumed them. "Where are we going?" asked her pilot. Velthara was quiet for a long moment. She had been one of the strongest voices opposing human membership in the council. She had argued that humans were too young, too aggressive, too dangerous to be trusted with equal status. Now she understood the truth. Humans had not been dangerous to galactic civilization. They had been its saviors. "Anywhere the humans are not," she finally answered. "Because wherever they went, they took their protection with them." In the months that followed, the galaxy learned the full price of its arrogance. World after world fell to the ancient enemies. Billions died as the Void Seekers consumed entire ecosystems. Trillions more lost their sanity as reality itself became unreliable in areas controlled by the Devourers. The few survivors lived in constant fear, hiding in deep space stations or underground bunkers, watching their civilization crumble. Some species tried to follow the humans beyond the galactic rim, but none had the technology for such a journey. The humans had spent 2 centuries building the ships and developing the technology needed for intergalactic travel. Other species had spent those same centuries arguing about politics and maintaining the status quo. As the galaxy burned, its Survivors finally understood what Ambassador Vasquez had meant during that final meeting. When she said humanity would find their own path among the stars, she had not been making a threat. She had been stating a simple fact. Humans would survive and prosper with or without galactic civilization. The price of fear was not just the loss of human protection. It was the realization that the galaxy had rejected not just a member species, but its own future. In their arrogance, they had driven away the only people capable of saving them. Now it was too late. The humans were gone, the barriers were broken, and the galaxy was learning that some mistakes cannot be undone. The ancient enemies had returned, and there was no one left to stop them.